let's talk a little bit about focus. Now, anybody here have somebody who has ADHD or knows somebody who has ADHD? Yeah. So here's, living with ADHD, the big thing is it definitely is a challenge. Whether you have it because it's hard for you to focus, or trying to corral kids that are definitely diagnosed truly with ADHD. We're going to talk a little bit about how we can improve not only just the symptoms, but do it naturally. And that's the key with this, because we know there's medication out there, and we're going to talk a little bit about that in just a bit, but this talks a little bit more about some of the natural ways to take care of the ADHD. Medications, we know Ritalin, we know that stuff's going on. Here's the situation. There are several medications that definitely help the symptoms of ADHD. However, we know that as soon as they discontinue the medications, what happens?
Goes back.
The symptoms come right back. So really what we're doing is we're just masking the symptoms, right? Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, there's a few things that happen when you're taking the medications. There's few side effects, or what I like to call unintended effects. And here's a few of those that are going on that happen with a lot of the common ADHD drugs. And so not only are you dealing with the ADHD, but then you have all of these side effects or unintended effects of the medications that are happening. It's not just that, it's also this. So we have quite a bit going on. This is a short list of what we found just as far as what's going on with the medications. So the idea is, how can we not have to deal with those things? So we're going to start from the beginning, and that is having a healthy pregnancy. Now, anybody who's come in here knows we ask about the stress of your mother while she was giving birth to you, and if you know anything about that, because we know for a fact that pregnancy, like having a healthy pregnancy, is a huge part in the development of the fetus. It can really affect what's going on. So staying healthy during your pregnancy can help you definitely avoid developing ADHD. Studies have also found that women who smoke or use tobacco or alcohol during pregnancy, it increases the chance of having children with ADHD. Now, here's the thing. We talk about the 3 different types of stress. Do you guys remember what those are? There's physical stress, mental emotional stress, and chemical stress. When we're talking with this, obviously during pregnancy, we're talking about chemical stresses that not only affect the mother, but can also affect the fetus in development. So that's a huge part of why, adding extra chemical stress can cause kids to have ADHD. So what do? Pretty straightforward, right? We all know that eating natural, healthy diet while pregnant will help you ensure that your kids will have the nutrients to develop. The big thing about that is that you need to make sure that you're giving the building blocks for the fetus to grow the way it should. And this is the other part of that mental emotional stress. Believe it or not, the stress that's around the mother while they're pregnant can definitely affect development of the fetus. Now, think about the first child. Was the mom more or less stressed than if they have a second child?
Probably more.
Probably a little bit less, right? Because think about, in a second child, you have what, a little toddler sometimes running around, and then you have all this other stuff. So there's there's differences with the amount of stress that moms have during pregnancy, and that's huge on the development of the fetus. Here's the big thing with ADHD. It's trying to figure out and analyze the problem, because we know that ADHD is definitely one of the most diagnosed things that's going on right now with kids, right? And so the idea is that people do have this, but oftentimes they're misdiagnosed. When your kid has been diagnosed with ADHD, you want to make sure that the person who's doing that knows what they're talking about. There's a lot of times that there's things that happen, so you want to find somebody who specializes in the field with ADHD and has taken a look and really diagnosed and looked at all different factors. It's really difficult to find out, what is going on with the kid and what's the underlying cause. When we look at this, there's definitely non-ADHD causes that are causing the inability to focus, which is a big reason why they're defined as ADHD. One is dyslexia, and some people are diagnosed with ADHD, they have dyslexia. Now the interesting thing, the style of chiropractic that I practice, KST, there's a doctor in the East Coast that is doing adjustments with what's called ocular lock and is reversing dyslexia within a visit. So literally somebody will walk in, won't be able to read properly, they'll do some adjusting with, and doing some things with the eyes and the brain connection, and they can read normal. It's pretty crazy, it's pretty fun stuff. We know also that the learning style of the student is a huge thing, and if it doesn't match, if there isn't a mesh, then obviously their ability to focus in school, we were talking about this a little bit earlier, that sometimes the schools just the learning styles don't mesh, and so the child looks like they have ADHD, they can't focus, but really it's just that they're not, there's different things going on that they're not being challenged, or it's going over their head, and we'll talk about that in just a little bit. When kids, are really gifted and they don't, they're just bored. I mean, you sit there and you're like, okay, I know this, let's go on to something else. If you believe that that's the case, find out, get your child checked to see what their aptitude is. That's a huge thing, because then you can find out, is it really from them just being gifted, so they don't want to focus, or is there something else going on? Now the other thing is the opposite. The material could be way too advanced. Now if I start getting into the whole biochemistry of what's going on, you guys would just glaze over and be like, oh, what is this? So it happens with adults. So you don't think that happens with kids? Sure, right? So that's another reason why people sometimes think that they have ADHD. Emotional behavior causes. These are that mental emotional stress, and oftentimes when we have kids coming in here who are hyperactive, we want to find out, what's going on. Is there stuff going on at the home? Because that's probably the first place where things do happen, is where you have issues, with tension at the home. Then you look, is there something going on at school? Are they being bullied? Is there something that might be going on there that's causing them to react? Okay? And then, is there anything else that's going on stress-wise that might be causing them not to be able to concentrate? Because believe it or not, this sounds pretty silly, but this is probably one of the major reasons why ADHD is diagnosed and actually incorrectly. So what's the big deal? Why, if they diagnose ADHD incorrectly, what's the problem? Well, the one thing is that we know that once a child's diagnosed with ADHD, it can absolutely affect how they're labeled. And what ends up happening is they're labeled as maybe problem children, or they're they need extra, they're focused on in a more of a negative way, in a sense, because they have this ADHD label. And we all know that tends to happen through the schooling. And so then what do? They recommend medication. Well, remember the whole side effects of the medication. So not only are you misdiagnosing because of something else, but you're adding on another chemical stress that has all these unintended effects, which are side effects that can be detrimental as well. So it can really make a big difference. Luckily, there's definitely natural ways to take care of it, and that's what we're going to talk about right now, that the big key is they don't have those side effects. So who would rather do something natural without side effects? Yeah, right? I think we all would, and that makes sense. So even though they might have been misdiagnosed with ADHD and treated with natural healthy remedies, it can actually improve their health anyway. So why not go more conservative before we go more aggressive and just cover up the symptoms? Here's kind of the idea of some of the things that we can do to help ADHD, some of the symptoms, by removing some things. Now, the first big thing that they know is that when you look at dyes and additives, if you remove those and preservatives from the diet, it makes a huge, huge difference. I basically say if it's not natural, don't eat it. Or another thing we say is the closer it is to the farm, the better it is for it. That's the key. So we know that the fact is that with these dyes are made or synthesized from petroleum. Who wants their kids eating oil, motor oil? Anybody? Yeah, I didn't see any hands up there. That's good. So they carry obviously toxic byproducts, things like mercury. Anybody heard of mercury? Yeah. All of a sudden, with the autism, stuff like that, arsenic and lead. And a scary thing too, lead shows up in places you would never expect. The FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, did a study on women's and children's vitamins. And they put out a list, and you can find this on the FDA, like looking up the FDA website. Over 300 children's multivitamins had lead in them. And you're giving that to your kid every single day. Now, it's not enough where it was above, obviously, standards that they set, but every day you're giving your kid a little dose of lead. Do you think that adds up over time?
Doesn't sound healthy.
No, absolutely not. So you would be very surprised where lead and some of these toxins show up. The other thing they've shown in studies is that food dyes, specifically yellow 5 and yellow 6, increase hyperactivity in children. So literally they pinpointed certain food dyes that actually increase hyperactivity in children.
Would that be in vitamins too?
That could be, yeah. A lot of times, we don't realize like some of the things that have food dye in them, and you'd be really surprised. So you really want to take a look at those, what you're feeding them. And obviously, dyes have been linked to long-term health problems and different diseases. And to tell you the truth, they've been changing some of these up, so we're still kind of, the jury's out. We don't know exactly what some of these new, food colorings and additives are doing. We don't know yet. We'll find out. We'll definitely find out. Eliminating sugar. Now, there's actually, if you take a look at what sugar causes, there's a huge list of what it does to your health. It's crazy, and it's hard, I know that sometimes this is not the most popular subject, but it's a good thing. So sugar and processed foods definitely can increase ADHD, but it makes sense. Think about this. When you give kids candy, what happens?
Off the wall.
Boom, 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 boom. They're bouncing everywhere, right? And these are kids that might be normal. I know if you give my 4-year-old some candy, being a redhead, she definitely is all over the place. I know that's the case. It causes things like inattention, irritability, then with hyperactivity and mood swings. What I notice is that what happens is they start out with the hyperactivity, right, and in the inattention, because what's happening? They got all that sugar in their body, so they're going, and then all of a sudden, what ends up happening after the sugar the blood sugar goes down? Boom, they crash, right? Irritability, mood swings, starting to make sense? It's just the cycle. It's what happens when your blood sugar spikes and then crashes. So sugar also, one huge thing that people don't understand is that sugar can compromise the immune system. And that's a huge thing. And it really, let's be honest, sugar contains no essential nutrients at all. So really, there's no reason or we don't need it. And definitely makes the body, it hinders the body's ability to remove toxins. So there's a lot of things that aren't great about sugar. Here's something you can do to help in a natural way. So we've given you some ideas of what to eliminate as far as nutrition and diet. Obviously, eating nutritious foods. It's kind of a no-brainer, right? But here's the idea. If you have a balanced, healthy diet with nutritious foods, it can help the body and the mind function properly and optimally. Some of the things that you got to think about with this is protein. Oftentimes, what we know is that protein is definitely necessary to build muscle, but it also is huge in alertness in the brain. Now, carbohydrates can do just the opposite. Think about eating something like, you go out and let's say you have some Chinese food with a lot of rice for lunch. What happens about an hour and a half later? How do you feel?
Yeah, you're sleeping.
You want to fall asleep, right? That's that carbohydrate that causes that fatigue. And that happens even with lunches. So there's things like protein, fiber that definitely make a big difference. This is probably one of the biggest things nutrient-wise that everybody can do, but especially kids, to make sure that their brain is developing properly. That's eating omega-3 fatty acids. See, the one thing about omega-3 fatty acids, what percentage of the brain is fat? Does anybody know? About 75% is made up of fat, cholesterol, things like that. So what we're doing is we need these essential fatty acids to help boost the brain, even now, even as we're sitting here, not just as a developing child, but just through life. What we do and what we've done in society is we've done low-fat, cholesterol-reducing drugs, things like that, and all of a sudden now we're finding that we're having mental issues down the road. And the big reason for that is because we're actually stripping the brain of something essential that it needs to function, to make sure those neurons are firing at 100%. And it's going to come out even more and more. They actually did put a little bit of a warning on the FDA website about statin drugs. If you guys know what statin drugs are, they're cholesterol lowering drugs, and I would say a huge amount of the population, you know, over the age of 50 is on them. But what they literally said is that it may cause dementia or other issues, even Alzheimer's. So they're actually, the FDA is actually even saying some of this, which, you know, if the FDA is putting it on their website, they've already, you know, it's got to be pretty far along. Here's the deal with the fatty acids. Our bodies can't make these, so we need to get the source of those. The one thing we do, our kids, we make sure that we find a good quality omega-3 fatty acids. These are great for kids because they don't taste like fish oil, they taste like, you know, orange, so it's great. Find something though that you make sure that it is high quality, that it doesn't have any other toxins like we just talked about that could be in some of the things. So if you're looking for them, definitely do your research and see what to use for fatty acids with that. They're normally found obviously in with fish, oils, and seeds, so you can do it that way as well. The big problem now with fish is our oceans are definitely polluted, so now we're seeing a lot of issues with fish too. It's unfortunate, but that's the idea too. Omega-3s contribute to several facets of brain function, including sending neurological signals and creating dopamine. And if you guys know anything about dopamine, the lack of dopamine can be one of the main causes of ADHD. That's why it's such an important nutrient. If you want to do one thing that will help kids or yourself, add a good high-quality omega-3 into your diet. Okay, the next big thing that could be a part or a cause of this is allergens from the diet. Has anybody ever heard of celiac disease? It's allergic to what?
Gluten.
Yep, exactly. So what happens is the body actually creates antibodies to wheat gluten, and then it causes all kinds of issues in the stomach. Well, things also can affect the brain as well with allergies. So that's something that we check here, and there's ways to check to find out if your kid's having allergies, and we have different ways of checking that out here. So if you have any questions later, let us know, or we can get you to the right people to figure that out. Now here's the non-nutritional. This is looking at the environment aspect of it. Create a positive environment for your child who has ADHD. What do when we talk about ADHD, how are those kids described usually? Like think about school. What are the
Problem child, yeah.
right? More a negative tone, right?
Yeah.
Like, oh, we got to deal with Johnny because he can't stay still. He's causing ruckus, things like that.
And he's destructive, yeah.
So we're focusing on that negative aspect, and so the kid is constantly getting that. Obviously, that's going to affect self-esteem. So we really need to make sure that the kid, that if it's your child or somebody you're dealing with that you deal with on a regular basis, let them know that they're loved. That's a big part of it because it's going to help them so they don't feel like they're less valued, so their self-esteem goes down. Because if you have lower self-esteem, do you think that will help or help ADHD, or is it going to make it worse? Yeah, because the fact is then you're like, wow,
Okay, yeah.
what the heck? I mean, everybody thinks I'm a bad kid. I might as well.
Be a bad kid.
Exactly, right? Self-fulfilling prophecy type of thing. If your child has ADHD, make sure that the teacher knows this as well. Most of the time they do know this, but then they can kind of create a supportive environment for the classroom as well. And how do you do that? So what I say is create structure in the child's day. That is one big thing. We all need structure. Let's be honest. I mean, when things are out of control and we don't know what's going on, how do you feel?
Stress.
Yeah, pretty stressed. Now think about a little kid whose brain isn't developed like ours is and doesn't know what's going on. They have to act that out. And that's what's going on. A great thing that you can do is let the child help you structure that day. Give them choices, 2 choices. Now make sure that you want either choice works for you, because otherwise don't give them one choice that you don't want them to do and one choice that you do. Give them 2 choices that are okay with you, and then let them choose. What that does is that gives them a little bit of vested interest in what they're doing, right? Then they feel like they have a little bit of control over what's going on. Do you like to have control in your life? Mm-hmm. I know we all do. I know I do. Give that kid some choices that they can get some control going on. Obviously, structure helps them stay on track. It helps them get things done, but it definitely makes them feel secure. It gives them some boundaries. It gives them some place to go. Kids are always testing boundaries. And the reason they want to do that is they want to feel like, okay, I know what I can do and I can't do, and it's good for them because it makes them feel more secure about what's going on. And if they have ADHD, that's huge. Did you guys ever see Rain Man? Do you remember the movie Rain Man? Dustin Hoffman's character? And when he got out of his structure, what happened? Yeah, he'd just go crazy, right?
Yeah.
Because he was acting like a kid. Even though he was an adult, but he had that mental, he was acting like a kid, and that's what happens. So structure is huge, and that's a big thing. Keep organized. Now, I can admit I have issues with this. So this is not one of my, my things that I'm the best at, but it is actually a good thing. When you stay organized, it definitely helps kids stay on track to do homework, tasks, projects. And this is, let me tell you, whether they have ADHD or not, it's so much easier. And I have to, I'm lucky that my wife kind of helps me with that, because otherwise probably wouldn't be as easy. But having two young kids, definitely being organized, huge difference. Now this is where we come in, and this is the big part of what we do here as far as ADHD. The other stuff was stuff that anybody can do, nutrition, structure-wise, like that. Chiropractic care is one of the best things that I've found that helps alleviate the symptoms of ADHD. Why is that? Because when the spine is out of alignment, it creates interference in the signals between the nerve system and the brain and the body via the nerve system. So now think about this. You're on your cell phone, and you go through a zone, and it starts kind of like breaking up, and you're talking to somebody, and you're only getting every other word. How good is that as far as like communication? Not good, right?
Not good at all.
That's what we're talking about here. Now, a kid with ADHD doesn't have that connection. Basically, there's two things that the kid can do, and we call this kind of the perfect storm, and what we talk about here. Your body's either going, so it's either on the gas pedal, or it's resting and digesting it, or it's on the brake. When there's interference with these signals, the body doesn't know what to do. Gas pedal, brake, gas pedal, brake, gas pedal, or it's all gas pedal, and that's the hyperactivity, right? So that's the idea. So proper brain activity is directly related to the alignment and function of the spine and the postural muscles along the way, because that's what surrounds the nerve system. When you correct, you get to the root of what's going on, especially with kids, because they don't have the layers of stress that we've put on over time. And you remove what we call subluxations, which is that interference of that between the brain and body. It helps relieve symptoms of ADHD, not only just short term, it doesn't cover them up, it's long term. And definitely it promotes brain development, and that's the big thing we talk about with kids. You can definitely do things nutrition-wise to promote brain development, but the system that controls and coordinates the whole body to do that is that nerve system, and we want to make sure that that's functioning the way it should. So here's the deal, the conclusion. Ultimately, how you deal with ADHD for yourself or for a child is completely up to you. It's your health. You can definitely, do things going through the medications. In short term, it might be something that you have to do. I'm not saying that that's something that's not on the table, but if you can do it with natural remedies, the risks go down to zero, as opposed to with the medications, those long lists of side effects that we talked about with that. So who would rather go more conservative first? Yeah, because can you always go to the medications afterwards?
Mm-hmm.
Sure, why not? I mean, it's easy to step it up. It doesn't work as easy to go back the opposite direction. Whether you have ADD or not, what we just talked about can help improve your life and brain and overall brain function and focus as well. So I kind of tricked you guys. This isn't just about ADHD, it's about you guys too. Everything that we talked about is going to make you focus better. It's going to make you function better and be able to do what you need to do with more laser focus, as opposed to being all over the place. Like you said, doing all these things at once. Mm-hmm. It's almost like, adults definitely do have ADHD in that sense. Mm-hmm. Anything that you need help with, we're going to be here. Our big thing, our big passion this year as far as education-wise is we want to make sure that you guys understand that there's other ways to approach a lot of these things. So we're going to be doing these talks quite a bit. If we can help you in any way nutrition-wise, or if you want to find out, if your nerve system is disconnected, let us know. Mary or myself, we can definitely do that. Find ways to help yourself regain that focus, do things that are natural, that don't have the side effects. It'll make a huge difference for you and for your child, and we see it every day here. In fact, the interesting thing before we get to any questions, we have kids coming in here all the time, and we see kids even like autism spectrum kids, and talk about that gas pedal or brake. Some, you know, that we have all these different kind of terminologies. But the interesting thing is you see these kids come in, and some of them are like raging bulls, just coming in, rah, you know, and after about, you know, a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, where they're getting connected, and we're helping their parents eliminate some of those issues dietary-wise, and they're setting structures. It's amazing to see what the kid looks like in about a month.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and I mean, you can definitely ask Mary about this too. They come in and they're much more at ease. They're not the raging bull anymore. And the parents are just shocked because they were told, Mom, you know, you can put them on Ritalin or some other, you know, crazy, you know, like whatever, like, you know, drug du jour is going on for ADHD. I love seeing that in kids. And I love seeing that in adults who come in and are scattered all over the place, and all of a sudden they get connected, and that focus comes in, it just comes into focus, and that's a really cool thing. So any questions?
I have ADD. I don't have the hyper part.
'Kay.
I have distraction and more. I don't have the energy around it.
Darn, right? Like, you know, at least get the energy part.
Yeah. Is there anything that you would apply differently from what we went over tonight for ADD versus ADHD?
You know, actually really not, no, because the fact is that attention deficit is due to multiple factors. The hyperactivity, you know, honestly, like, you know, I mean, oftentimes in kids, it's just kids being kids.
Yeah.
You know, and as we age, we kind of wish we could somehow bottle that and like put it in a pill and just like, yeah, my kids were just in here, I'm like, man, I wish I had that energy at the end of the day, just like
Yeah, you're all over
cruising
the
around, you know, and that kind of stuff. So, yeah, you just have, you know, the part where it's hard for you to focus. But the thing is you need to make sure that you're doing things that will help enhance that. And what we talked about here, even for people who don't have ADHD, I know, like, you know, I can tell if I'm, you know, not taking the proper nutrients, it's hard for me to focus. If I'm not exercising, you know, doing something that way, you know, that's part of the structure, you know, doing the exercise aspect of it. It causes me to not focus as easily. When my stress level is really high, I have a hard time focusing, too much on the plate, you know, you're like, what's going on? So all those things are definitely things that you could do, you know, that could easily help you get back into focus. So,
Okay.
does that make sense?
Yes.